The past few videos have been concerned with the relation between the Buddhist teachings, or the Buddha's teachings, and enlightenment. And this next verse focuses on a particular teaching known as the Skandhas. It's possibly not as vital a teaching now as it used to be. I think Buddhists generally learn about the Skandhas and understand the basic idea and move on. And the Skandhas were about counteracting the idea of an ego soul, or what the Hindus would call a jiva. The jiva is a rather simplistic notion, but it's the one that many people who subscribe to some form of spirituality might hold to. And it's the idea that after you die, your jiva takes on another birth, and so on until it becomes enlightened. That's the simple idea. But the Buddhists can see no evidence for this. Even though they have rebirth, they believe in many lives, they don't see it in terms of the jiva, or the individual ego soul. So there's an interesting contrast there. And I've spoken about the Skandhas before, back in video 13. There's a video devoted to the Skandhas. But I think more useful understanding of the Skandhas is given in video 211. It's called The Practice of the Skandhas. It's seeing the Skandhas as an expression of enlightenment practice. So verse 472, some say that an ego soul really is, which is separate from the Skandha-appearance, or that the Skandhas really exist. But there is, after all, no ego soul in them. So what's the Buddha saying here? He's saying that some say that an ego soul really is. In other words, there's some people that believe in the jiva, the individual soul, which is separate from the Skandha-appearance. So the Skandhas were a teaching put in contrast to that of the jiva. And it's interesting, the terminology here. It says Skandha-appearance. Because what's happening is, well, let me just say what the Skandhas are. The Skandhas are form. Form's what attracts the attention. Could be any sort of sensory experience. Feelings, perception, or psychological disposition, and consciousness. And the Buddhists would say, well, that's all there is. There's no ego soul in there. But these are just discriminations. These words themselves are simply discriminations. The Skandhas themselves are simply a discrimination. In this teaching, we're moving beyond all discriminations. The Skandhas themselves don't really exist either. And we're told that there is, after all, no ego soul in them. And what this means is they have no intrinsic substance, no more than anything else. So the early Buddhists did take the Skandhas to be some kind of ultimate reality. And they went into subdividing them and came up with lists of what were called dharmas, quite elaborate lists of dharmas which were the fundamental elements of reality, and they believed in the reality of these. So what we're being told here is that the Skandhas have no more substance than the jiva. So this is another Buddhist teaching. This is a specific example of having to move beyond Buddhist teachings to realization. And this is pointed out in the next verse, verse 473. When one's doings, together with the passions, primary and secondary, are brought to light, one perceives the world to be the mind itself and is released from all sufferings. So this is the way. It's not about giving up the idea of a jiva. It's about giving up the idea of the skandhas as well. In fact, it's about giving up all ideas about the nature of reality. Because what we're moving towards is the realization of mind itself. When one's doings, together with the passions, primary and secondary, are brought to light. Now, here's an interesting phrase, isn't it? In one's doings. So this is your behavior, your karma, together with the passions, primary and secondary. There's probably a list of these. Passions, primary, passions, secondary. I haven't bothered to research this. Maybe somebody else can research it and put a comment below. But on a practical level, we have to understand passions as what drives us, what motivates us. Especially if we're spiritually inclined, especially if we're a Buddhist. We'll be passionate about the Buddhist teachings. We might be passionate about the Skandhas even. We're passionate about a Buddhist way of life. We're passionate about our lineage. We're passionate about the Eightfold Path. So that would be our primary passions. But the secondary passions, I'm going to suggest we understand as our unconscious passions, our subconscious passions. You know, why do we want to be a Buddhist? Why do we want to be religious? Perhaps we just want to belong to something. Perhaps our life feels empty and we want to give it meaning. There are some very basic motivations which can push us in what might be described as rather sublime directions. But that's the reality of the situation. The reality isn't that you're a Buddhist, perhaps a Buddhist of a particular degree, you know, a very successfully practicing one, or perhaps you're not very successful and you kind of lapse quite a lot. You know, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. This will determine your action as your karma. We become aware of all this. We become aware by stepping back from it. We stop believing that this is my identity as a spiritual seeker or a spiritual practitioner or as a Buddhist or as a Muslim or whatever. We step back from that. In this way we bring them to light. We bring to light all the ways we try to justify ourselves, all the ways we might puff ourselves up, or all the ways we might judge ourselves. The ego is a mess. But we can step back from it. We can step back to our simple awareness. Observe, witness. In this witnessing is liberation. And in the next phrase it says, one perceives the world as mind itself. So we're not stepping back in disgust. We're stepping back in a way that we can actually embrace everything. You can't embrace something when you're pushing right against it. You have to step back just a little bit, so that you can embrace it all. When you're constantly pushing forward, there's no embracing going on there. To embrace, you need to be static. You need to be still. So all of this is mind itself. There's nothing to achieve, nothing to prove, nothing to attain. And in this, there is release from all sufferings.